Hey everybody, I'm Zach,
And I'm Jesse
and you're watching In Depth.
on Now You Know.
So, Jesse, you've heard this story about the Tesla troll.
Yeah, so basically there's this guy who went by the name of Montana Skeptic, and he kept writing all of these bearish articles on Tesla on Seeking Alpha. But the interesting thing about this was that no one knew who Montana Skeptic was.
Right. Yeah, for 3 years he got to write articles and never publish his real name.
And finally, people figured out who he was based on how he talks. So this guy was allegedly Larry Fossey. He was a managing director at RAR Enterprise.
Yeah, and they're a fund that invests heavily in oil.
So all this time, everyone thinks that these Seeking Alpha articles are being unbiased and stuff like that. Turns out, basically, he's just a front for oil companies.
Right. And it turns out that Musk reportedly called his boss, who runs the RAR Enterprise and is a pretty big Tesla fan himself, drives a Tesla,
Right.
and told him to stop.
Right.
And he did.
So he deleted his account, and so that's through. But it's funny because the whole time before this, it was just allowed to continue.
And that's because, Seeking Alpha is not a reputable news source. It's just a website that prints stuff and people follow it. But that doesn't mean they've done their research, doesn't mean that they want to be unbiased. And in this case, if you're writing because you invest in oil, you have a vested interest in making sure that Tesla doesn't do well.
Right.
And let's kind of get into that for a second here. Let's talk about oil.
Oil is huge.
Yeah, how huge is it? Let's wrap our head around oil for a second here.
Right.
Let's throw out some numbers to help you really get the sense of it.
So we did a little bit of a deep dive.
Okay.
We took the top 50 oil companies and we added up all their revenues. And if you do that, you end up with a number that is larger than the GDP of a little country called Japan. Interestingly, the GDP of Japan is the third largest national GDP. So there's the United States, then there's China, then there's Japan.
Right.
And right in between the second and third would be big oil.
Yeah, over
Just-
$5 trillion of revenue.
$5 trillion in one freaking year.
And that's just from the 50 top companies. We're not
Right.
counting all oil. There are plenty of companies that are huge companies that are not on this list.
Right, that only make a couple $1 billion a year.
Right. So here's another number to throw into the mix.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone says, well, EVs and solar, they get subsidized by the government. And so it's, taking my tax dollars to invest in them, and I don't want to do that. Let's talk about what we do with oil.
According to The Guardian, oil is subsidized globally $5.3 trillion in 2015.
But wait a minute, you just told me that the revenue of the top 50 companies was $5 trillion. Now you're saying they're subsidized over $5 trillion.
Yes.
If they make $5 trillion, why do they need to be subsidized at all?
I don't know. Basically, a lot of these subsidies are tax breaks. So they're getting like $5 trillion
Of our tax money.
of our tax money. Now, for those of you who are like, okay, well, what is $5 trillion a year?
All right, yes. So, give it to us in, one day. What is that per day?
So that's about $13.7 billion a day.
So, oil companies are making in revenue over $13 billion a day.
Yeah.
So, every day that oil can keep pumping oil out of the ground and selling it to us, they're making $13 billion.
Right. And when they're looking at something like the Model 3, they're saying, okay, it's a Model 3, blah, blah, blah. Where do they fill it up? And everyone's like, oh, they plug it in.
Right.
There's no oil. And
Right.
they go, okay, but how do we make our $13 million?
You don't.
And so then they go, oh, crap.
Right.
This car is amazing.
And people are buying it.
And people are buying it.
And
Oh,
for
crap.
Every car they buy that's an EV, we're not making any money because
Right.
we sell them gasoline, and gasoline doesn't go in this car.
Right.
So we have to make sure we slow down this adoption curve
Right.
any way we can.
And let me just remind you that if you are the oil companies, you're collectively making over $13.7 billion a day. So there's a lot that you could do to try and slow EVs down, even if it's a little teensy tiny, like, oh, just a little bit, just a few $1 million.
Right. I mean, there's a playbook they have, and the thing is, it's worked before. It's not like this is something new they're coming up with. Let's talk about the electric car. So cars were invented in 1880s, and in the early 1900s, turns out electric cars were head of the pack. There was 38% electric, 40% steam, and 22% gas powered. And so what did the oil companies do? Well, by the 1920s, electric cars had all but disappeared.
Right. Now, battery technology was not exactly where it is today.
But many people preferred electric cars over gas cars because they were quieter, they were easier to start, they were more efficient. So there was plenty of advantages. It's just that oil companies made no money off of them.
And so they went on huge campaigns to get rid of electric cars, to get rid of electric trolleys and replace them with buses. There are story after story in city after city, especially in the U.S., of the burning of electric trolleys and them being replaced with city buses.
Right. A lot of oil companies bought up those companies and then just destroyed them.
Right.
Because they were competition for their oil.
This is the exact same story that we're seeing here, except this time they're on the back foot.
Right. This time they got caught.
Right.
And here's the thing. They always get to have their story told. They get to troll us and write their short stories about how Tesla's going to fail. And I'm kind of tired of it. Are you tired of it?
I'm tired of reporting on stories that, we didn't write, we didn't come up with. We have to react to Tesla's going out of business. Hey, did you hear that this or that? Hey, let's talk about little teensy tiny little stories, right, that have very little impact on the broader range of things.
Yep.
Let's talk about the Model 3 for a second. This car is freaking amazing.
It really is.
Okay? Anyone who has been in one wants one. It's just how that works. It doesn't matter what you drive. You could drive a Porsche, you could drive a Lamborghini. You would still want a Model 3 in your garage.
Yeah.
And there's just no going back. Most people, when they get into the car and they drive it, are going to be so blown away, they will not want to get back in their old cars.
They realize it's the future. Like,
Right.
It's just so obvious when you get in it and experience it.
And it's finally to the point where it's attainable. It's finally to the point where people can go, okay, it will cost $35,000 in, say, 6 months. I can get behind that. And there's a lot of people who are like, I didn't know about this car. I didn't wait in line about it because I didn't know anything about it. Now I want it, and they're buying them now.
I'm just tired of wasting our time. I
Right.
mean, the shorts and the short-sighted will keep writing their stories about negative things, about Tesla going bankrupt and EVs not working. We need to stop wasting our time being fooled into following them down this road, wasting our time discussing negatives. Let's start writing the stories about what's going to happen to our world, like this one.
We predict that the Model 3 will be the best-selling car in the U.S. by this time next year. That's right.
That's the headline.
You heard it here. Okay, that is the story.
1 year from today, go back to this episode, see if we're right.
Yep. We could be wrong, but I don't think that we will be.
We did some calculations, and we came up with the Tesla is going to have sold 352,000 Model 3s between now and July of 2019, placing it just behind the Ford F-150. So it'll be the best-selling car, best-selling sedan in the United States. It obviously won't beat the Ford F-150, which sells about 450,000 pickups a year.
Right. And these are pretty conservative numbers.
Right. I mean, I think it's possible they could actually beat the Ford F-150, but I'm being conservative here and just saying it'll be the best-selling car in the U.S.
We're being conservative, and the Model 3 could still be the best-selling car in the U.S., and no one is talking about it.
Right.
Not a single other news source is picking up on this.
Right. This isn't a little story. We're not talking about this as like something you'll be like a footnote of history.
Right.
It'll become the best-selling car, and that's an EV competing against all other ICE cars.
Right.
They're producing the cars in the correct numbers. It looks like it's going to work. Now, we didn't predict this on the first day the Model 3 was announced.
Right.
We didn't predict this, even earlier this year. We waited until we're pretty sure of our numbers here.
Right.
We're pretty sure that Tesla can deliver and that this will be the best-selling car. And here's the thing. I think we're the world's leading authority on this. I'm sorry to say it
Right.
because I don't usually like to toot our own horn, but I think we've had more people in the car than anyone else.
And we have been, this is our 99th Tesla Time News tomorrow will be our 99th episode. For almost 2 years, we have just been constantly looking at Tesla and Tesla stories and other EVs. I don't think there's a single person on the planet, except for, people who have been following along. But even then, we're reading, but then throwing away like 30 more stories every week.
Right.
When we started, we were not the leading experts on Tesla, but I would say that we are one of the leading experts.
Yeah,
on Tesla.
we've had the Model 3 since December. We didn't just predict this then. We've waited till we've had plenty of time with the car. We've driven it over 10,000 miles. We've gone to a different country in it.
Right.
Like, we've had so many people in the car. We've talked to so many people about it. And we're just so excited about the future. And we're so tired of wasting our time talking about all this crap that isn't true and isn't going to happen.
Right.
And we're like, why are we week after week having to take our time and talk about this other stuff when this is the true story?
Right.
This car that you're seeing right here, this is the story.
Right.
The Model T changed the world. Why did it change the world? Because right before the Model T, horses was the way that you got around. And everyone thought that was the way it was going to be for pretty much ever.
Right. And they said, okay, maybe in 20, maybe in 30 years, we'll start to integrate cars into our society. Maybe 50 years, most people will have a car.
But they had so many negatives, right? It's too expensive, your new automobile. Right. Where are you going to gas it up? How are you going to fix it? But the Model T came out, and it was like, the average person could afford it.
Right. 13 years from when the Model T came out, horses were not on the roads anymore. It was all automobiles. 13 years. It can happen like that.
And that was at the turn of the last century when production was way slower.
Right. They invented the production line to make it.
You think we're crazy here, but it's going to be 1 year from today when the Tesla Model 3 will be the #1 selling car. It'll be an EV. And what do you think that's going to do to all the other car manufacturers? They're going to have to switch faster than they're switching now.
Right. Here's the thing about that. They can't.
Do you know how amazing the Model 3 is? As you begin to tear it apart and look inside, you realize that this thing is incredible. And these other car companies can't just throw a car together that's like this.
That's true.
Tesla has years ahead of them.
I look forward to every new EV that gets announced, that we finally see an unveiling for, or we hear about a date for an unveiling. It's ridiculous that each piece of we're going to tease it. Now we're going to announce that we're going to announce it. Then we're going to unveil, we're going to give you a little picture of just silhouette. This is what the headlight looks like.
Right.
And it's like, you guys don't get it. I want a supercharging network. I don't care what it looks like. I drive a Leaf, dude. I don't care. I just want it to have batteries and to get me around. And my next car will have supercharging. That's it. Right. That's all I need. That's the car that I want. So many people have a misconception about it. So many people don't know enough about how to charge and stuff like that. These are things that over the next 2-3 years are going to be completely demystified, because people like you are going to be driving around in a Model 3. You're going to be showing your friends, and your friends are going to go, what the hell am I doing in my car? It's not fun to drive. It's loud. It could kill my whole family if I left it running in the garage.
And it is killing the whole planet.
And it's hurting the environment.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do you realize that when the Model 3 gets to be the #1 selling car, it can no longer be ignored?
Right.
When something gets to be #1, it becomes the talk of everybody. People who didn't even know what you were talking about, they know a #1.
Right. Anytime there's a news story on the morning news and it's like, we figured out some new thing, that's the talk of the town. Model 3 is going to be just around for a week on the morning news or whatever.
You're watching from all over the world right now, right? You all know what the Ford F-150 is.
Right.
That's what the Model 3 is going to be.
It'll be that in a year.
That's our prediction.
Now you know.
Thanks so much for watching Now You Know. We work hard to bring you videos about things that we think you'll find useful, but we need to know from you what you want to see, so leave your comments below. Also, don't forget to go over to our Patreon page, where for as little as $1 a month, you can watch our Patreon bonus story every week on Tesla Time News. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.